Who is the best netrunner in the Cyberpunk universe? From Alt Cunningham's invention of Soulkiller, to Songbird's harnessing of the Blackwall, and Rache Bartmoss's destruction of the old net, we've got a lot of contenders for the title of GOATED Netrunner. I did a deep dive on Cyberpunk sourcebooks, shards, and conversations to siphon through all the lore and determine the most skilled and powerful netrunner in the history of the dark future. In today's video, we're going to analyze the backstory of the four most famous netrunners in Cyberpunk 2077. So buckle up, grab some iced coffee, and let's dive into the net. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. And I ain't talking about some tarot card prediction from Misty, I'm talking about today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is completely natural, vaporless, and free from harmful chemicals like nicotine. It uses flavored air to substitute for unhealthy habits, filling the void in your routine in a natural, guilt-free way. Basically, how it works is you have these flavor cores that you install into your Fume device. It comes with an adjustable airflow dial on the wooden end, and you inhale the flavored air from the top part. There are lots of different flavors to try out, like crisp mint, orange vanilla, maple pepper, and many more. The airflow dial is also designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, which is helpful for de-stressing while breaking your habit. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/BigDanGaming or scan the QR code and use code BigDanGaming to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code BigDanGaming to save an additional 10% off your order today. Out of all the netrunners on this list, none made a bigger impact on the history books than Rache Bartmoss. Night City's most wanted cybercriminal single-handedly brought about the downfall of the first net when he unleashed the notorious data crash Rabbits virus. Bartmoss was already infamous at the time of this attack, but the incident solidified his name as a legend. You could say that net running was in Bartmoss's DNA. The young man took his first dive into the net at the age of 4, honing his skills enough over the next decade to start landing corpo jobs as a teenager. These gigs never lasted long though, as Bartmoss would inevitably betray his employer in one way or another, ghosting them and cleaning his record before moving on to his next job. Bartmoss was raging against the machine from a young age, and that teenage anti-corpo angst carried on well into adulthood. The corporations wouldn't sit idly by as Bartmoss fleeced them, however. By the age of 17, Bartmoss had his state identification number wiped by the authorities. But despite being a wanted criminal with a target on his back, Rache managed to make a living with his net-running skills. There was one job in particular which set Rache up for life. During one of his last stints in the corpo world, working for a company called CCI, he wrote a series of demon software programs. And after CCI fired him for dropping a political movie into the company database, Rache fried their internal systems, causing the company to go belly up, before snatching the demon software program and selling it off to other software firms. This move turned Rache Bartmoss into Rich Bartmoss, you know what I'm saying? For the next decade, Rache Bartmoss was on top of the world, or rather on top of the net. But to him, those things were one and the same. He ran with other top-tier edge runners like Spider Murphy, Dog, Edgar, and Alt Cunningham. And since Rache didn't need any money, he and his crew could stick it to the corpo elite just for fun and their ideals. Bartmoss and his cronies took over an entire apartment complex, which became the crew's base of operations. Bartmoss spent most of his time plugged into the net, with his physical body parked in a refrigerator, the very same one we can discover in a landfill in Cyberpunk 2077. But one day in 2020, Rache's freewheeling net antics caught up with him. An unknown assailant launched an attack on Rache, stopping his heart in the process. While Bartmoss's physical body perished in the attack, Rache managed to live on in the net, eventually making contact with Spider Murphy and even running some jobs for Militech in the Fourth Corporate War. This situation was short-lived, however, and Bartmoss's luck ran out in 2022 when his net signal got tagged, leading to a raid on his apartment complex. Knowing that he was about to die in the net this time, Rache decided to go out with a bang. First, he invited Spider Murphy out on a date. Man's gotta shoot his shot, I guess. And at the end of the awkward encounter with his Netrunner protege, Bartmoss unleashed a virus onto the net in an event which sealed his legend in the history books. The roving autonomous Bartmoss interface drones, or Rabbids for short, was a pernicious virus designed to infect and destroy all data on the net. Within a matter of months, Rabbids had infected nearly 80% of the entire net infrastructure, leading to massive crashes in the stock market, data breaches, and other generalized chaos. The net became unusable for the vast majority of people and corporations. The destruction of the first net struck a major blow against corporations and the established order, but it only created space for corps to consolidate their powers further on the next version of the net. The worst effect of the data crash was the unshackling of a number of AIs, which would go rogue and inevitably would need to be cordoned off beyond the Netwatch-constructed Blackwall in cyberspace. So Bartmoss's actions led to the construction of the Blackwall and the setup of the net as we know it in 2077. But while Bartmoss created the most far-reaching effects out of any netrunner on this list, his most legendary act was one of pure destruction. His skills were mostly used for fleecing corporations, and yet the corporations are more powerful than ever 50 years after his death. So at the end of the day, Bartmoss' dreams of unchained electronic liberty were never realized, and many netrunners of the present day throw shade on the man's name.
No shit, Biotechnica? Enough to make even Bartmoss blush.
That paranoid clown? Please. Sure hope I don't wind up packed in a fridge standing... who knows where.
I happen to know where. Garbage dump in the Badlands.
Aside from Rache Bartmoss, the most talented and famous netrunner of the early 21st century was Alt Cunningham. Unlike other top-tier netrunners from her era, Alt wasn't only capable of edge running, she was also a talented coder who could write her own programs to boot. And it was this talent for coding that would solidify Alt's name in the history books, but also bring about her downfall. In the early days, Cunningham ran with the likes of Rache Bartmoss, even taking control of the Pacifica Net for a time. And much like Bartmoss, Cunningham landed herself on Netwatch's most wanted list with a hefty bounty placed on her head. But Alt was not satisfied with simply living as a simple merc. Cunningham was fascinated with the human mind as well as artificial intelligence, and her goal was to create a program that could make a faithful copy of the human mind. She was eventually contracted by the ITS Corporation to create just a program, which became the very first version of Soulkiller. During this time period, Alt began dating Johnny Silverhand, and we see flashbacks of Johnny's memories of her during Cyberpunk 2077. Cunningham's talent as a netrunner caught the attention of the Arasaka Corporation, who sought to employ her services by force.
Alt's kidnapping, it's collateral shit. They swiped her to get at me.
You even know what she does for a living? Girl's one of the best runners around. Soulkiller, an AI. Sound familiar at all?
Of course. Urban legend with the shittiest name ever.
It's no legend. Soulkiller's real. And your Chumbas at Arasaka just hired the runner who wrote it. Take that in. Sokka with Soulkiller to do with as it pleases. Grim, my man.
Arasaka hired a group of goons to kidnap Alt Cunningham outside a concert venue, gravely wounding Johnny Silverhand during the attack. Arasaka forced Cunningham to write a new version of the Soulkiller program for them, and eventually made her its first victim. Alt anticipated this outcome and created a failsafe in the Soulkiller program, which would allow her to escape Mikoshi. During Johnny's first attack on Arasaka Tower, Alt Cunningham was killed with Soulkiller, which we experienced from Johnny's POV during Cyberpunk 2077. What Johnny didn't know at the time was that the digitized version of Alt managed to survive and escape the grasp of Arasaka. She was, however, eventually captured and forced to work on a new version of Soulkiller. This plan was thwarted when Johnny and crew attacked Arasaka Tower again in 2023. This time, Alt was rescued by Spider Murphy, who scattered Alt onto the net, hoping she could be reclaimed one day. Alt managed to escape Mikoshi, and later even created a safe haven for other victims of Soulkiller. The haven was dubbed Ghost Town, and was home to anywhere from a dozen to thousands of human AIs, depending on which source you believe. In 2077, V and Johnny make contact with Alt Cunningham, who is chilling and vibing beyond the Blackwall. And depending on your choices, Alt can become more powerful than ever when she's given access to Mikoshi. But is this really Alt Cunningham? Can a rogue AI engram really still be considered the same as the person they were based on? In any case, Alt's technology is still alive and well in 2077, which is more than can be said for Rache Bartmoss or the other OG netrunners on this list. Arabella, aka Spider Murphy, was a premier netrunner and wanted criminal in Night City during the 2020s. She was a netrunner in Rache Bartmoss's crew and was involved in the attack on Arasaka Tower alongside Morgan Blackhand and Johnny Silverhand. Much like Rache Bartmoss, Spider developed her talents for edge running at a young age, starting out with her first cyberdeck at the age of 9. She continued to hone and develop her skills over the years, but the trajectory of her life would change when she came into contact with Rache Bartmoss. It was actually Spider Murphy's father who was responsible for wiping Bartmoss's state identification number. After Spider contacted the famous netrunner to warn him of her father's actions, Bartmoss and Murphy became fast friends. Bartmoss took Spider under his wing, mentoring her and accepting her into his crew. Spider's online persona and icon quickly garnered fame throughout the net. She used a Japanimation-style anime babe as a means to charm those she came into contact with. The icon is immutable, a busty, curvaceous, super realistic rendition of a gorgeous redheaded girl done in anime art style and clad in very tight clothing. Sometimes the clothes will change, sometimes the hair color changes, but it's always Spider. The infamous anime babe icon wasn't just for aesthetics. It also helped protect Spider Murphy's IRL identity, much like VTubers today. This was important because Spider, Rache, and the rest of their crew liked to stick it to Netwatch and wreak havoc on the Corpo Elite just for fun. Netwatch wasn't amused by the actions of Bartmoss and Murphy, however, placing hefty bounties on each of them. And while Spider managed to effectively evade authorities, her mentor was not so lucky. Right before Bartmoss brought about the data crash, he invited Spider Murphy out on a date in the net. She found the whole encounter awkward, since Rache was not a particularly affectionate guy, and his entire demeanor was shifted during this interaction. But after Bartmoss launched his Rabbids virus, Spider was ecstatic. The whole net's falling apart before my very eyes. Data fusing together, fortresses melting like ice cream, ones and zeros flooding the information highway. Holy f***. Say goodbye to the old order. Death to courts. Whoop! This excitement was short-lived, however, as the corps quickly regained control of the net, creating the Blackwall and stamping out any of the freedom that Bartmoss's gang expected to solidify by destroying the old net. Bartmoss was wrong. Everyone was wrong. Every corp, government, and gang now has their own net that they rule with an iron fist with no regulation, no accountability. Surveillance hasn't disappeared. In the hands of those who govern us, it's only gotten worse. Spider's disillusionment with the net collapse and pain over the loss of Rache led her to take action. She joined the Militech operation to assault Arasaka Tower, inserting herself into Johnny Silverhand's team, which is where we see her in Cyberpunk 2077. The attack on Arasaka we experience in Johnny Silverhand's memories are quite different from the version of events in the Cyberpunk sourcebooks. I have a full video on that if you want to explore the topic, but for the purposes of this video, we'll just focus on Spider Murphy. Spider's role in the operation was to rescue Alt Cunningham and destroy the Soulkiller program by installing a virus in the Arasaka mainframe. She successfully achieved both objectives and managed to escape the tower with Rogue. The next day, Rogue, Spider Murphy, and Shaitan infiltrated the Sea Viper, a ship owned by Key Arasaka, Sabur's eldest son and heir to the Arasaka throne. Spider uses her net-running skills to incapacitate all of the guards before removing all of the ammo from Key's weapons and waking him up to invite him to a tea party. During this conversation, Spider appealed to Key Arasaka's sense of honor and duty and convinced him to effectively commit self-deletion by submitting to the Soulkiller program. The attack on Arasaka Tower was a great disgrace on his name, so he accepted Spider's offer and plugged into Soulkiller. Within 5 minutes, the heir to Arasaka's empire is dead, leaving Hanako and Yorinobu as the only living heirs. After confirming Key's death, Spider Murphy destroyed the last remnants of the Soulkiller program and went outside to gaze at the stars, bidding farewell to Morgan Blackhand, Johnny Silverhand, and Rache Bartmoss. And this is the last we ever hear about Spider Murphy in the Cyberpunk sourcebooks. While we can see a few mentions of her in the present day of Cyberpunk 2077, nobody really knows what happened to Spider Murphy after that day. The last Netrunner we'll consider for this video is Songbird, the rogue FIA agent and all-around baddie we meet during the Phantom Liberty DLC. So-Mi got her start as a Netrunner around the age of 13. For the next few years, she was living on the edge with her chooms in Brooklyn, New York. She spent her time targeting corporations for big payouts, eventually making a name for herself after landing a major attack on a Biotechnica facility in Oregon.
Anything I'd find on BBS gossip feeds.
Biotechnica in 63 or 4. Fermentation facility in Oregon. Off the grid hack. Sound familiar?
But these actions also landed her on Netwatch's shit list, and the group sought to arrest and prosecute Songbird. At this point, the FIA swooped in and made Songbird an offer she could not refuse. Come work for the NUSA, or go to prison on serious charges. Maybe even get killed. Songbird spent the next decade working for the FIA on all sorts of shady and secretive operations, earning her spot as one of the president's most trusted agents. After the Unification War, Songbird began probing beyond the Blackwall at the order of President Myers. Netwatch even detected one of her breaches in 2076, but they were unable to trace Songbird as the perpetrator. These operations took a massive toll on Songbird, as each time she connected to the Blackwall, she opened the door to rogue AIs. She felt herself slipping away over time with each subsequent dive, and decided she needed to take extreme action to escape the FIA, which is where the main plot of Phantom Liberty comes into play. Without rehashing the whole plot of the DLC, I'll just say that we can see how powerful and how sharp Songbird is. She is able to manipulate people around her to fit her agenda, including Myers, Reed, Kurt Hansen, and even V. And when push comes to shove, she is able to wreak untold havoc on anyone who stands in her way. But where does the influence of Songbird end and the Blackwall or rogue AIs begin? One could argue that Song is merely a puppet of rogue AIs, potentially even Mr. Blue Eyes, who is the man that organizes Songbird's escape from Night City, should you choose to betray Reed. Before we decide on who the best Netrunner in all of Cyberpunk is, I want to give a brief honorable mention to Lucy from Edgerunners. I didn't end up including her in this video because, while I do love the character, I don't feel that her contributions as a Netrunner stack up when compared to legendary figures like Rache Bartmoss and Alt Cunningham. Lucy is also only like 20 years old in Edgerunners, and has only been operating independently for a few years, so it's possible she'll make a bigger name for herself later on. Lucy stands in shambles right now, I know. But without further ado, who is the best Netrunner in Cyberpunk? I have to put Alt Cunningham at the top of my list. For me, it's really between her and Rache Bartmoss. The reason I decided to go with Alt is because the technology she developed had a more lasting impact on the world than Rache's data crash virus. Bartmoss made a much bigger splash with the Rabbids virus at the time, and the net was forever changed by his actions. However, corporations quickly rebuilt the net afterwards and solved the rogue AI's problem by constructing the Blackwall. On the other hand, Alt Cunningham's Soulkiller program is still being used and developed in the present-day game. Plus, Alt has managed to live on as a human AI, while Rache Bartmoss is a corpse in a fridge out in the Badlands. The best Netrunners in the Cyberpunk universe often end up becoming tools or targets of the most powerful people on the planet. Bartmoss was taken down by a corp. Cunningham was taken down by a corp. Songbird fell victim to the NUSA and FIA. And Spider Murphy fell into obscurity, likely hiding out to avoid getting targeted by Arasaka. So my final list goes Alt Cunningham number 1, Rache Bartmoss number 2, Songbird number 3, and Spider Murphy number 4. But I want to know what you think in the comments below. Who do you think is the best Netrunner in the Cyberpunk universe? If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to Big Dan Gaming for more Cyberpunk and RPG videos. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my content. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.